Gill, thank you very much for being here today. And could I start by thanking Jack Sharma, the principal of the college, and all of his staff for allowing me to visit the college today and in welcoming me and showing me around what is a truly wonderful institution, comprehensive education at its very best, that everyone in the community can come here, develop to their best of their ability and the skill levels that go with it, and encourage people to achieve everything possible. It's up to us to deliver this style and this standard of education for the whole country. Thank you to all the staff and indeed all the students at this wonderful college. I think it's a great place and you can be very, very proud of it. And can I also welcome Aftab Nawaz, the leader of the Labour group, and Kizar Hussain, the deputy leader, who are doing such a great job on behalf of the Labour Party and the people of Walsall. And to thank them for what they do, and thank Jill for all that she does as your candidate for a general election that cannot be very far away. We live in very strange times when a court today ruled that the Prime Minister was wrong to ensure that Parliament was prorogued. In real terms, that means shut down. Put it into real English. Prorogue means shut down in order to escape any scrutiny, in order to escape any debate. Because the Labour opposition has now defeated this government in this Parliament and the 2015 to 17 Parliament 44 times. And in his first 6 days in office, Boris Johnson managed 6-0. That's a 6-0 defeat, by the way. And so we put forward legislation because we're very, very concerned about the dangers of a no-deal exit from the European Union. Make no mistake about it, Boris Johnson is trying to run down the clock to get a no-deal exit from the European Union on the 31st of October. No deal. Sounds good, sounds attractive. We're leaving, there's no deal, don't worry. You should be very, very worried. No deal will mean problems on food supply, problems on medicine supply, massive problems for every manufacturing plant anywhere here in the West Midlands and indeed across the rest of the country, as those supplies that come in and the exports that go out and indeed the supplies that go back and forth through the Channel Tunnel and on the ferries will be held up or delayed. The government knows that because documents, what they term Yellowhammer, showed them exactly that. Some of those documents were released. The government refused and freedom of information requests to publish them, refused questions in Parliament to publish them. So we had to use what powers we have to force a special vote, a special debate in Parliament to pass a demand that those documents be published so that we might know the truth of the advice the government has been given. And think about that. We found Theresa May's government in contempt of Parliament and forced them to publish the legal advice they didn't want to, and we've now forced Johnson's government to publish the documents he didn't want to publish. These are very, very serious times indeed. When you have a Prime Minister elected by 95,000 members of the Conservative Party who seems to think he speaks for 65 million and can shut down debate and democracy. I've got news for Boris Johnson. We live in a parliamentary democracy where governments must be held to account by Parliament. And I look forward to leading a government that will be very happy to be held to account, however uncomfortable that might be at various times. And so, that's why we voted the way we did this week, to try to prevent a no-deal Brexit. And if Parliament has to wait until the middle of October before we go back, we'll be doing exactly the same again. I want a general election. I want a general election to take this government on, but I want to prevent a no-deal exit from the European Union because of the chaos it would ensure. That's why we have proposed, and the law says that the Prime Minister must apply for a 3-month extension to give time for that negotiation and that discussion to take place. A Labour government elected, whenever this general election comes, will give people a choice on the future. Give people a choice between a credible option of an arrangement with the European Union or remain in the European Union. We will not be offering the option of crashing out over the cliff in order to make way for any government to do a deal with the United States when all the American healthcare companies are lining up with their beady eyes to take over our NHS. Sorry guys, it's not for sale. And so, an election will not just be about Brexit and the way in which this government has behaved. It will also be about the kind of society we're in. Why are 40% and more of Walsall's children living in poverty? Why has Glasgow got the shortest life expectancy in the whole country? Why do children growing up alongside major roads have less lung capacity than others? Why are there so many people sleeping rough and living homeless? Why are there so many young people, not from poor families, not themselves poor, but cannot afford to get anywhere to live and have to live with their parents all over the country? Why are so many young people running up debts of £50,000 and £60,000 just because they've been to university to get a degree? Why are young people paid less than older people? Why isn't there a living wage of £10 an hour? Why are our mental health services so underfunded? Why are our hospitals under such pressure? Why are our local authority services under such pressure? The answer is the word austerity. Austerity brought in 2010 to deal with the financial crisis. George Osborne and the Liberal Democrats assured us it was a temporary measure, we'd all got to just take a bit of pain and all would be well by 2015. And then it was 2016, then it was 2017. Whatever date it is, it's always 5 years away. It's like chasing the end of a rainbow. Whenever you get there, it's gone. And what have they achieved in that period? Have they paid off the debt? Have they reduced the deficit? Or have they actually created a more deeply unequal society than we've ever had before and made the majority of working class people pay through frozen wages or indeed lost wages and in some cases lower wages than they had 10 years ago? We're living in a times when somehow or other it's deemed to be a good thing to make the majority of the population poorer in order that a minority can become richer. I am fed up with living in a society that's so obviously disgracefully divided between the richest and the poorest. I want to change that. I want to change that through an election. I want to change that by electing a Labour government committed to creating a different and better society. Think of the things that were in our manifesto in 2017 when they wrote us off at the beginning of that campaign. Write Labour off at your peril. We're there ready to go out and do that campaigning. Our government will start from the principle that we have to invest in the future. Hence, we will establish a national investment bank. That national investment bank will be, obviously, national, will fund major national infrastructure projects, but will also have regional transformation funds, West Midlands, East Midlands, North East, North West, and so on, as well as in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Those funds will be disbursed locally, decisions will be made locally, investment will be made locally. So where's a good idea on new jobs, new industry, new development? Well, there's a good idea on how we can improve communities and give real economic opportunities to people. That regional transformation fund will be there to do it. It'll be public money alongside private sector money in order to develop jobs and local economies and interests. Walsall, Willenhall, Wolverhampton were once enormous manufacturing centres. I remember being taken to Richard Thomas and Baldwin when I was a kid at school in the Shropshire, amazed at what I saw, amazed at the jobs and the industry that was there. Thatcher tried to destroy our industrial base in this country. Slowly, there's been some resurgence. I want to see an investment in good quality, clean, environmentally sustainable manufacturing industry jobs for the future. That means investment. Investment, yes, in infrastructure and in the wherewithal to make those places, but it's also about the education system. I'm full of praise for colleges like this, but I'm also very well aware that not all places have colleges like this. Not all children get the chances they should. And so we will, and it will be our great legacy, establish a national education service. The post-war Labour government's great legacy was the National Health Service. Ours will be the National Education Service. Take the commodity out of education and insert the right to education. Grade to grade. Knowledge should be passed from one generation to the other. Support for one generation should be given to the other. And that starts at the very youngest age. Those wonderful Sure Start centres the previous Labour government set up brought needy children, needy families together with every other family, gave that support, gave that wraparound support that helped community cohesion, and the child understood that you're being brought up, of course, by your immediate family, but you're also being brought up by the community. That wonderful African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. That was the principle behind those children's centres. And I went recently to the first children's centre at Campaingn in Corbyn to talk to them about their vision. It long predates the ones the Labour government brought in. So we bring back that idea of Sure Start and the children's centres. And we provide free preschool nursery education for 2 to 4 year olds for 30 hours per week, so that those children can learn socialisation, learn playing together, learn to develop together speech, language, and all the other things that go with it. And properly fund our primary schools so the head teachers aren't collecting money at the school gate in order to keep the school going, and properly fund the Senkos and the teaching assistants that we need, that are such an important part of the experience of young children in school. But also the creativity of children, the creativity that's there to make things, to model things, to dream, to imagine things. And so we're going to have a very special fund called the Pupil Arts Premium, which means every child in every school will get to learn a musical instrument of their choice during their school year. And that's not some kind of zany add-on. That is actually a real opportunity, will help them so much in everything else they do. So it is about education for all. But it's also, as this college does, demonstrating that what we learn and how we develop is very important for ourselves and our well-being in our community, but it's also giving real equality of esteem, of respect, whether you've done vocational education or academic education. A society needs skilled engineers, skilled plumbers, skilled computer programmers, just as much as it needs skilled architects, skilled lawyers, and all the other things that come out of universities. Let's respect education and learning and give adults the opportunity to go back into adult education, which has been so grievously destroyed by this government over the past 9 years. So we are a knowledge-based, education-based society where we understand each other so much better. And I'm determined that that will be the legacy of our government. We invest in the education system, we invest in the economy for the future. But we're also, as a globe, faced with something very, very serious. Climate change, global warming, loss of habitat, loss of biodiversity, loss of species. It matters. It matters because we all rely on the natural world in order to live and survive. What's happening to the Amazon rainforest, what's happening to the rainforest in West Africa actually matters because they're the biggest carbon sinks in the world. We all rely on them. And so it's a bit odd when President Trump stands by, Prime Minister Johnson stands by, President Bolsonaro stands by and allows people to destroy that precious global asset. And so our government will be absolutely committed to fulfilling all the requirements that we signed up to, the Paris Climate Change Accords. I look forward to welcoming the climate change committees to Britain next year to take things further and take things further much faster. But I also look forward to leading a government that will fulfil all our requirements that we've signed up to of zero emissions by 2050 or earlier if we can do it. Everything we can do to bring about sustainability. But it doesn't have to be a threat. It doesn't have to be a loss of jobs. It's actually a great opportunity. A great opportunity for green energy production. We will invest in the Swansea Bay Lagoon, tidal lagoon, to generate electricity, the Mersey Barrage to do the same. We will invest in solar energy and in wind energy, but we'll also invest in retrofitting homes, providing solar panels on all new buildings that are put up, but also greater efficiency in transport by investing much more in public transport as well as electric vehicles. There's a whole generation of jobs and opportunities that will come. We calculate 400,000 jobs could be created by the green industrial revolution. And ever since May the 1st, when I proposed on behalf of the Labour Party to Parliament that this country, Britain, become the first in the world to declare a climate emergency, a climate crisis, other parliaments have followed. It was Labour's initiative that led to Britain being the first parliament in the world to do that. I'm proud of that on behalf of the Labour Party. And the climate change roundtables that we've been holding ever since then, all around the country, amazingly creative ideas. I've been to a number of them. I went to a great one in Blackpool where a lot of people came along who had been opposing fracking in Lancashire. Opposing fracking was the danger of it, the pollution that comes from it, and I just made it very clear to them, under Labour, we will end fracking because we believe it to be dangerous to the environment and to ground sources of water. So it's going to be a green industrial revolution that will make a very big difference. We also live in a world where human rights are under threat in many places. People are forced to flee and seek refuge from wars, from climate crisis, from environmental disaster, and from systematic abuse of human rights. And we, as a country, should play our part in supporting those people who are victims of that. Be they the Rohingya coming from Myanmar into Bangladesh, or people coming from Libya into Italy or other countries in southern Europe. But we should also recognise two things. Everyone who's a refugee is actually a human being wanting to contribute to our lives and our society. The greatest British car invented was the Mini. Who designed it? Alexis Aganis, himself a refugee, and there are so many other refugees that made such an incredible contribution to our society and our world. But it's also about the international strategy we adopt. I make no bones about it. I absolutely opposed the war in Iraq, not because I was any sympathiser with Saddam Hussein, but because I did not believe it was going to bring about the solution it was claimed, and as I said at the time, it would beget the wars of the future, the terrorism of the future, the refugees of the future, and the insecurity of the future. Let's have a government dedicated to human rights. Let's have a government dedicated to peace. Let's have a government dedicated to working with and empowering the United Nations. We can't solve all the world's problems, but we can sure as anything be a voice for peace, for justice, for humanity, and for environmental sustainability. And so our government will be very, very different. Very, very different in many ways. But to get there, we've got to win an election. We've seen what the Tories can do. We've seen what they and the Liberal Democrats could do when they brought in austerity in the first place. And we've seen over the past few weeks what has been going on. When you have a government that's more keen on shutting down Parliament than speaking up in Parliament, when you have a determination to throw us into the arms of the United States on special trade deals. In case Boris Johnson wasn't aware of it, the last time I looked, Donald Trump only ever did trade deals that are labelled in very big letters, quite enormous letters, America first. There won't be any equality of trade arrangements. It will be a supplicant applying to the United States for something, and that something will be loss of our protective regulations and all the rest of it. So let's think very, very seriously about how we approach this election campaign. Many people are throwing all kinds of things and accusations at us and our party and seeking to divide our society. I was proud in the 1960s and ever since to oppose racism in any form. I remember when Enoch Powell was in Wolverhampton. I remember the Rivers of Blood speech. I remember the horrors that went with that and the racism that went with it. We cannot tolerate anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any kind of racism at any point, anywhere within our society. It is only there to divide us. But our party, Labour Party, more than 500,000 members, determined to go out there and take a message to the whole country of how the world could be, how this country could be. It's not going to be an easy journey. It's not going to be easy to democratise and change and empower people within our society. But imagine a government that was measuring itself against the benchmark of ending rough sleeping homelessness, of ending child poverty, of ending the degrees of inequality and poverty that exist, of building 500,000 council homes, of regulating the private rented sector to grant security to people, of raising corporate taxation in order to pay for education within our society. 95% of the people will not see any tax rises, but the top 5% will. I think that's a small price to pay for the massive improvements we'll get within our society as a result of it. And so, the election which the government thought they were going to get in order to fiddle around with the EU leaving date in the middle of October is not going to be the middle of October. We are absolutely ready for that election whenever it comes, a month later, or whatever it happens to be. So we've got campaigning work to do all over the country. I've done 40 campaigning events during the month of August, and I'll be on the road all over the country with great candidates like Gill, and visiting places, great places like this, and talking to people about their horrors of the stress and the difficulties of their lives. I was talking to somebody in Norwich on Saturday of his experience of a man with disabilities going on to universal credit, the debt that he was migrated onto, the problems he had, and others he was telling me about who had to get short-term, very expensive loans just to survive under universal credit. I don't want people to survive with that kind of stress and horror that goes with it, or those with disabilities seeing their benefits cut, or women of a particular age, the waspy women, suddenly finding that they're going to be plunged into a longer period before they get a pension that they've been subscribing to all of their lives. There are so many injustices that it will require a Labour government to overcome. But it means we as a party and a movement have to be completely united on what we're doing and how we do it. I was yesterday at the TUC in Brighton. I was very grateful to them for inviting me to speak to them. I outlined the rights at work that Labour will bring, the Ministry of Employment, the Department of Employment and Employment Rights that we will bring, and the jobs that will go with it. That was respect at the workplace, that sense of democracy that will come to the workplace. All of these things can be achieved, but we've got to go out there and campaign for it. The mainstream media probably will not do it for us. Something tells me. And sometimes some of them, I understand, say unkind things about individuals, including me. That's okay. I don't mind them speaking to me from the gutter. The only problem is I won't be joining them in the gutter to take part in that debate. We are better than that. We will take that message out there. We will knock on those doors. We will promote those discussions in those communities that will give us that chance. And the road to a Labour government lies in the constituencies we're going to gain. The road to a Labour government lies in electing Gill as your MP. I'll be here to support you. Lots of people are going to be here to support you. Take that message out there. Hope versus greed and despair. Hope versus poverty and misery. Hope versus whatever the Tory party calls themselves, or the Brexit party, or anybody else. Our movement, our people, united. We're going to win. Thank you very much.